Welcome back for more box office predictions. We've got a very big weekend ahead of us with a whole bunch of new wide releases, but can't get to that until we recap what happened last weekend. And in Fantasy Movie League, in the Predictions with Perri League, we went back down. We had so many weekends with tons of people getting perfect lineups, and apparently it was a little more difficult last weekend because we only had 3 players get that perfect lineup. They are Sir Julius, Devil, and the Lesser Goods Cineplex. Congrats, guys. It was a tough one last weekend, especially with Birds of Prey underperforming, so you guys got it. Congratulations. Job well done. All right. As for my own predictions, I did go 5 for 5, but as I already said, Birds of Prey severely underperformed, and it only made $33 million opening weekend. Then, though, my numbers get a little back on track with Bad Boys for Life at number 2, which took another $12 million. At 3, it was 1917, which really enjoyed Oscar weekend despite not taking home the top prize. It only dropped 2.7% and made another $9.2 million. Number 4 went to Dolittle, which fell a mere 13.9% for $6.5 million. And then it was Jumanji: The Next Level, which only dipped 7.4% and made another $5.6 million. Let's roll into these new predictions now. We've got a lot of movies hitting theaters this weekend. New movies. We've got The Photograph, Fantasy Island, Sonic the Hedgehog, and also Downhill, although I believe Downhill is only getting something like 1,500 theaters, so I don't think that one's going to wind up cracking the top 5. But before I even reveal my 5, do know that it is a long weekend ahead of us, but these numbers are for the 3-day weekend, so that's what my predictions are going to be this time around. Jumping into it, let's just go for my number 5. This is where I have Bad Boys for Life. This movie has certainly enjoyed quite the run so far, and with so many new wide releases hitting theaters this time around, one might think that last weekend's percent change of about 32% is bound to come up, but I think the holiday weekend is going to help it out. I think its run thus far has proven it's got staying power, so I think that percent change could wind up staying stable this weekend, and if that winds up being the case, this movie is making another $8 million this weekend. Now moving on to the number 4 spot, this is where we're getting into some of those new titles, like my pick for number 4, Fantasy Island. So the very first comp I thought about for this one was another Blumhouse release. The movie that we saw hit theaters last year, Valentine's Day weekend, it was Happy Death Day to You, and when that opened up, it only made $9.5 million. But I do think that the Fantasy Island concept, paired with the enormous ensemble, is going to draw more of a crowd for that movie. I am a little hesitant to go too much higher than what Happy Death Day to You made, though, because of how poorly horror movies have been performing thus far this year. I don't want to really go for a comp with this one. Instead, I've been keeping an eye on how both this and the movie The Photograph are tracking, and it does seem like Fantasy Island is tailing that movie by the slightest bit, so I will get into my Photograph number and my reasoning for it in just a minute, but with that in mind, I'm giving Fantasy Island an opening weekend total of $15 million. Now it is on to my number 3 pick, and of course, that is where I have newcomer The Photograph, and this one's fairly simple because I just trust Will Packer movies. He's got a track record, and I think going back to some of his other films is the way to figure this one out. I don't think it's going to open as big as the movie What Men Want. When that one opened up, it made about $18 million. I think that might be a little too high on this one, but if I look back at Will Packer's last collaboration with Issa Rae, it brings me to the movie Little, which made $15 million. That was not a Valentine's Day weekend release, though, and in this case, given the content in this movie, I think it could get a little bit of a boost because of that. So I'm looking at Little's $15 million total, and I'm just going to bring it up a little to $16 million, and that's where I have The Photograph for its first weekend in theaters. Moving on now to my number 2 pick, we are right back to Birds of Prey. So yeah, this one was a little bit of a bummer for me last week, and I really liked the movie, and I thought it was at least going to hit the studio expectations, which it didn't, but it does have $85 million in the worldwide box office right now, which does match that reported production budget. But before I move into my number prediction for weekend 2, I will say I do read the comments on these videos, and I, for one, will never root against a movie or root for a movie to fail at the box office. And when you think about it, within a studio, within a franchise, all ships rise. So if Birds of Prey was not for you, totally fine. Try not to tear down the love that others might have for the movie, because, well, what's the point in that? Moving into the numbers now here, the first thing I started to look at was the movie 50 Shades Freed. That one opened up roughly the same time of year, and its first weekend in theaters, it made $38 million. Then weekend 2, it saw a drop of 55%. One, Birds of Prey does have a little less to lose. And 2, I also think that this movie has the potential of having more staying power, and 50 Shades Freed had a lot more competition in its second weekend of release, thanks to Black Panther. With all of that in mind, I'm bringing that percent change down the slightest bit for Birds of Prey to an even 50%, and that could mean the movie is making another $17 million this weekend. And that brings us to our number 1 movie of the weekend. I can't believe it, but it's newcomer Sonic the Hedgehog. After everything that this movie went through, I am kind of pleasantly surprised and happy for it that it's going to wind up making a good chunk of money this weekend. Yes, Dolittle and Jumanji are still hanging on, but it's been a good while since we've seen a new family-friendly wide release, and I think that's going to work in this movie's favor big time. Looking back to get me started here, I landed on the movie Alita: Battle Angel. Valentine's Day last year, that movie opened up with $28.5 million. I think that one, though, had the bigger challenge at the domestic box office. So that's the floor I've got for Sonic right now. I think it's going to go a good deal higher than that. And also, well worth keeping in mind that this time of year is when we got major money makers like Deadpool and Black Panther. There is money to go around right now. How high can it go? It did cross my mind to use both SpongeBob, the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, I get them all confused, and then also the Lego Batman movie. I don't think it's going to go as high as those, though. I think there is a little more brand awareness for SpongeBob and Lego, but I think Sonic could come in right behind, and the number I'm going to go with on this one is $50 million for Sonic's 3-day debut. It is time for that recap now. My number 1 spot is going to Sonic the Hedgehog with a total of $50 million for the 3-day weekend. Then I've got Birds of Prey coming in at number 2 with $17 million, followed by The Photograph at number 3 with $16 million to kick off its run. Then it's Fantasy Island opening up at number 4 with $15 million. And finally, Bad Boys for Life closing out my top 5 with a 3-day weekend of $8 million. There you guys go. Those are my box office predictions. I got to hit the road. But before I leave you, I'm going to remind you to head on over to the Predictions with Perri League. Lock those lineups. If you do not know how to play Fantasy Movie League, I've got a handy explainer video up on the channel, and all the information with the URL and password to join the league are in the description section of this video. Also, before I go, I've got a big list of Patreon shout-outs that I owe some folks out there. A great group, all returnees. They are Nathan, Craig, Ryan, Paul, Andrew, and Corey. At this point, all of you well know that all of this would not be possible without you. So thank you for supporting me as I do what I love over here. Big thanks to everybody out there watching this video. Dewey sends his love, but it's freezing in my apartment right now, and he's laying in the sunshine elsewhere. Guys, I'm out of here. Thanks so much for watching this video. I will see you next week to see how we all did on our box office predictions.